this is not even like that difficult of a task, but has become
It's
that difficult of a task.
like this book.
What a segue! That was great. So on Friday, I have like my own reading response coming out to this video because, so
Fabulous.
for context, we're recording this on a Monday and I will probably release this next week. But so in that, I tried to be like, so here are my takeaways from my reading experience. And so everyone's going to watch that and be like, oh, you didn't like the book, but you tried to like get a good experience. And this is going to be like, this was the worst thing.
We're just gonna trash it.
Okay, yeah, I'm like, so this is like fair warning to everyone who likes this book. Go away. No offense,
Go away.
but go away.
I'll give you this. I will give the fans this. It is an easy read, and it is not The Goldfinch. So it still gets more than
2666.
2666. So it is not the worst book I have read.
No.
It's
No.
just
So here is my summary. One sentence summary is that of my video later this week is that I've seen so many people say that this book helped them get back into reading, and you and I have never had that experience of needing to like get back into reading.
fair enough.
So it didn't have that like that catch for us of being like the first thing we've read in like a decade, and it's like, oh my gosh, like this is so great. Like we have just a different frame of reference, basically.
That's fair.
That
Definitely.
is like that is my thoughts on why we didn't like this, and I wonder if the same people who really love this, if they came back to it in like 10 or 15 years, would have nostalgia for it, but would be like, it's not as good as I remember, you know?
Right. For sure. Definitely.
Um, but in comparing it to our other two most hated books, this one is actually entertaining.
Yes.
The other two, 2666 and The Goldfinch, one was just probably stuff I can't say on YouTube, and the other was just boring. Like legitimately just dull.
It was boring and it was depressing and it just went on and on. And we've talked about it so much where it's like this is a book about an art theft and it's boring.
Yeah. How can a book that opens with an explosion, literal explosion, be that unexplosive?
Right. It's just
anyway, we're not here to complain about The Goldfinch.
We could have a whole other video, so
about how terrible The Goldfinch is. We're here to talk about A Court of Thorns and Roses, which, as I said, it did have entertainment value. I did have like some level of like, oh, I do want to see what will happen. I think it took like 2/3 of a book to find a plot. That was one of the lowest stakes plots that claimed to be high stakes. Like, at no point in all of her little like trials was I ever like, oh no, is she going to do? Obviously, she's going to do it. Like, but like the fate of the universe rests on her shoulders. But it's like, I don't believe you when you say that.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're right. It was so entertaining. Like, it was entertaining enough for me because I was stuck on a flight when I read it. I was flying from Ireland to Boston, and I read it on the flight for the most part, and then on the drive, like, to my parents' house. So it was easy to read. I flew through it. You were like, stop.
Yeah, you landed in the States, and you're like, okay, so I've like basically finished it, and I'm like, Stita, I haven't started.
What can I say? I had a baby sleeping on top of me, so I might as well read about books about fairies that are, I don't. That's another thing that bothers me. They're not fairies. I don't know what they are,
N-
but they're not fairies.
no, like
They're like
they are.
they're like they're like those people that like are literally created to be attractive. Like they're super attractive and super powerful and like yay sexy times.
They
They're not fairies.
they have gotten ACOTAR has done to fairies what Twilight did to vampires.
Yes. Yeah, that about covers it.
And there's nothing necessarily like wrong with
Right.
that. Like, and I say this in my video, if you love these books and you just want to read like fairy smut for the rest of your life, go off, do you. Live
Absolutely.
We live in a terrible near apocalyptic landscape. If it makes you happy, have
Go for it.
a great little old time. Um
Enjoy. I'm just glad you're reading. So read the fairy
yeah,
smut.
have a good time. But like I
I
don't get why people are so like obsessed with these characters because they don't have personalities.
especially the main character. I
Yeah,
could not like I'm
Feyre
like
Feyre is stupid.
so stupid. She was the stupidest
Dumb.
person. Oh my god. It was like I kept thinking it was like having a conversation with my 4-year-old because she kept asking the same questions over and over again. I'm like, girl,
Yeah,
he
no,
told you.
I say that she has to be told everything at least twice. The book could be like 20% shorter if we didn't have to tell Feyre the same things over and over again.
I just called her Fairy because I wasn't sure how to say her name, so she was just Fairy to me. But like, not only was she really stupid, she was also like paranoid but gullible. So like, she didn't trust the fairies, but the fairies can't lie. I'm like, what are you on, child? Like, hello?
Yeah, no, and it just none of her motivations made sense. Like she so desperately wants to get back to her abusive family.
Her abusive family. Like,
Why?
the
Why?
whole opening of the book, which is again, I think this comes from a place of having read so much, especially as a teenager, where I read like Hunger Games, I did read Twilight, all of those young A books as a teenager, I read them all. So I'm reading this one going, oh look, one, braid, tick. Oh, two, she's hunting for her family, tick. Oh, she's poor in the woods, tick. Like it, she just ticks every single YA box. There is nothing original about her.
Mm-mm. And that's not a bad thing. There's a reason why
No,
like those books sell, but it's also just a reason why it's not going to be as engaging to us because
right.
we've already read this book
Yes.
like 10 years ago or more.
Or
Because
more. Yeah. Probably.
I was like, yeah, 10 years ago when we were
No,
teenagers. I'm like,
no
nope,
longer,
nope,
honey.
nope, nope. We're
Nope.
both right around 30. Okay, never mind. No, yeah, 10
Well,
years
I'm
ago when
like,
we were teenagers.
someone said to me when what's his name died, the Michael Gambon died. He's 82, and I'm like, he's 80. He's not 82. And someone's like, do you know how old Harry Potter is? I was like, no, stop.
Yeah, well, the first Harry Potter, let's never forget the first Harry Potter book came out in 97.
Yep.
We were infants.
You were an infant. I was a kid. About.
I would have been 3.
I think I was like 4 or 5.
Yeah,
Yeah, 5. I was 5.
yeah,
Because I actually started reading the Harry Potter books as they were coming out. We would wait for them to be published. Like I remember that whole waiting period.
yeah.
Um,
And this is something that I also bring up in my vlog video is that um I have so I didn't read the Harry Potter books until I was 16. And so
mm,
I never had that like big attachment to Harry Potter
yeah,
that is like definitional millennial. Um
yeah,
and I think that's because I didn't read them at a young age. So if you read the first Harry Potter book when you are 16, it's just not going to be because it's like a book
Yeah.
for like 11-year-olds because he's 11.
Right. Now, that is one of my interests, my little niche I love middle grade books. So like I think even now if I read it, I'd get enjoyment out of it. Like I studied a little I studied children's literature a little bit. So like I get that. Um but I had the growing up with it. Like it is a different experience growing up with it versus returning it as an adult. She intended them to be read distanced as you age,
Hmm.
which like you're only going to get one generation who gets to do that. We live
Yeah.
in binge culture. We're just going to read it all in one go.
Yeah. So, yeah,
Mm.
I read them. I started reading them because the movie started coming out. I just hadn't.
Um,
I just hadn't had a lot of interest in them before that because I have like a weird reading journey, which I think I've talked to you a little bit about it before, and that like I basically taught myself to read when I was like
mm,
2.5, and
yeah.
I was like talking, that's so blasé. Let's move on to reading immediately. Um, and so I taught myself to read at a really young age, and I just immediately started devouring books. So by the time I was like the Harry Potter age, where even reading
Yeah.
Harry Potter young at like 6, 7, I had already passed that reading level in a lot of ways.
Right.
So I was just in a weird position of most of the books that were written for my age level were not my reading level. So
Yeah.
what my mom ended up doing is she needed to know if the books she was giving her child were like going to be appropriate, so it had to all be books that she had previously read. But she, as a mom of two small children at this point with a third one on the way, was like not in the place to read every single book her kid who checked out 10 books from the library every week.
Yeah.
So I ended
That's
up
hard.
reading, yeah, I ended up
Yeah.
basically all reading books that my mom had read because she's also a lifelong reader, which meant
Yeah.
that I was reading mostly like classics
Fair
when
enough, though.
when I was
It's a
in like
good.
elementary school. And I say that and people are like, "Oh, so you're a pretentious kid." I'm like, "No, it was just because my mom literally had to take care of like a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old, and they were going to have another, like, your kids are around those ages. You know how much work that is."
It is. It's a lot of work, and I don't know how readers did it before, like the audiobooks on your phones, because like I literally just have them in my ears. And I'm like doing laundry, and
Yeah.
I don't know how you did it before, like
Yeah.
how mothers did it in our age when we were kids. I'm like, how did you get any reading? Okay,
Well, the magic of editing is I can just cut out all of that.
you can just cut it out. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll just be like gone.
uh, but anyway, I think I'm gonna segue back to the book, or
Yeah,
try to.
that's probably a good idea because all of my thoughts about the book are mostly like contextualizing it into like why did I not like it and haven't actually thought a lot about the book itself.
it, and it helps to go back. I think it helps to also to mention that's this is our history. We've read all this genre when we were teenagers, and it's hard to go back as an adult who has continued to read.
Hmm.
Um, I we've gotten spoiled with like better characters, more in depth, more complex. Uh, we also both of us are a little more aware of current events and things like that, and how that employs into our books. We prefer books that have more social commentary, and this has no social commentary
Mm-mm.
at all, none. In
No.
fact, in such a way that I'm like, this is awful because, like for example, as we're talking about the young adult character, it bothers me so much that she is very much that old feminist view of I'm not like other girls, and she doesn't feel she's not empowered by her femininity, which I
Mm-mm.
think people are re-embracing with, as you've said, the Taylor Swift era and Barbie, and which is fabulous. Because God, I remember being a teenager reading Hunger Games, and being like, "Yeah, I'm not like other girls either." Like, and I grew out of that stage. So again, I've grown past that. So then to be thrown back into this book where this chick is not like other girls, she doesn't have any female friends, and like her basically her life ends up revolving around a guy.
Yeah. I think it's important to note that this book was published in 2015
Right.
and has gotten this huge resurgence because of TikTok, I think.
Hmm.
And it is I haven't done enough like cultural archaeology here to like figure out why this book got like pulled back from like now almost a decade ago, right? We're at the end of
Yeah.
2023. Like why? Because there are a lot of books that are being published now, but there's also the ACOTAR effect. There's been a lot of copycats. Just like the
Yeah.
Twilight effect, then we were just like flooded with paranormal romances through the entirety of the 2000s.
Right. I actually
um
recently read Fourth Wing, so
oh, and
it's better. It is better. It's not great. I gave it like I think 3 stars instead of the two I gave this
okay.
one. Like she was smart. She wasn't dumb. She had moments where she was kind of feminine. She would dress nicely, and she had female friends. Her best friend was a gal pal, and there was loyalty, and so I was. It was better, much better. Still really predictable. You know, it was spicier than this book. There was some spice in this one.
um But going back to like having like being feminine, having female friends, yes, Feyre has no female friends, and also her sisters are somehow the worst characters of the book. Like,
Yes.
even though nominally it's supposed to be the Amarantha or whatever her name was, who's like the big bad villain, and these fairies are supposed to be all scary and terrifying. But the creatures that she reserves the most hate toward are her sisters, and a big reason that we're told to hate them is because they like feminine things.
Right.
And like I understand the idea that's like, oh well, they want to still live the way they did when we were rich, but also like they're in a mourning for like their lives being ruined by their
Yeah.
incompetent father
Um,
because they're all, I mean, I'm assuming even though Favor's the youngest and she's what like 17 or 18, I'm assuming
Something
they're
like
all
that.
supposed to be like roughly the same age, and so all
Yeah.
three of them were literal children when this all happened.
Right. And
And
then
they had so much more because Favor says that she was like 11, I think, when their mom died. So
yeah.
her sisters were like middle to older teenagers who had grown up their whole life this way, lost their mom, who they were clearly closer
Yep.
to than Favor was. So it's like criticizing them for wishing that they had pretty dresses seems like such a stupid, petty thing to do.
And as awful as her sisters were, it should have fallen on their father to be like, "Oi, you two need to step up and help out as well." Like, okay, he's got a crippled leg, whatever, he can't go hunt. He should be like fathering.
Yes, that doesn't stop you from being a parent.
Right.
To your three children because yeah, again, they would have been like all still actual children when like the mom died and they lost all their money and like all of that. They would have been
Yeah.
literal children who needed to still be parented
Hmm.
effectively, and that was just the wildest
I could almost
illogical.
like I could almost understand it if it had been done as a throwback to like all these fairy tales with the evil stepsisters and evil. I could kind of get that. But then, like, later in the book, she starts to kind of be friends with her sisters a little bit, but like I don't know. I'm like, why did you want to return to these people? Why are you trying so hard to protect them? Because they have literally done nothing for you aside
Right,
from
and
like letting you go hunt out in the woods all alone and then stealing all your money. Solid.
yeah, and favorite needs is therapy, not a fairy husband.
Who also is like, okay, as crappy as her personality is, Tamlin, or as I called him, Tampon, um, no personality.
None!
Nothing.
Not
None.
a one.
N
Not
not
a
not a
one.
single character trait other than he's handsome. Like there is, why do you love this guy? He's nothing.
And flip side, why does he love her? Because her
Right,
personality is hunt.
right. And ask
That's
questions.
it.
And like also like how did she not end up with the best friend who she was constantly going hunting and hanging out with?
Right. Who also like actually kind of had a personality.
Right.
Like Lucian had thoughts and opinions and was
Yes.
he was the only one that like made actually funny jokes.
Right. He
Like
was
he had a couple
entertaining.
of
He had a
moments where
person.
I was like, right, he like actually was a character.
Yes. He had a
And
backstory. He had trauma. Like solid attempt at a
right,
character there.
we did at least a C.
Yeah.
Uh,
But no, she's gonna be with Mr. Tampon. My
and
phone kept correcting it to tampon, and I stopped trying to correct it. So now he's tampon.
and like okay, so we're not. I have no interest in reading the rest of the series, so I like know how the whole thing ends. So I know that she doesn't like in the end end up with Tamlin slash Tampon.
That's yeah,
So
I got that from
and
social media.
and I get that probably part of the reason that we're supposed to like have this sort of why reaction is so that she like her ending up with Rhysand like makes more sense. But then that destroys the entire plot of the first book.
Right.
Then there is no the whole emotional moment where she's supposed to stab him in the heart means nothing if the whole time we've been setting up this idea of why does she even like this guy? Like I
I
didn't
actually
care.
I actually was super mad she kills the other fairies that like in that challenge. I was like,
Yes.
the fuck is this?
Yeah, it also seemed like a massive like tonal shift
Right?
because now like all of a sudden this book decides to like whip out some like existential like questions about morality all of a sudden
At the very end.
when we
And
have
then
not set up that at all. Like you can have
no.
that moment. There's lots of books that have that moment where like the hero has to decide if they're going to kill an innocent. It's like the classic like Peter Parker with the school bus versus
Yeah.
MJ thing, right? Is like who are you going to save? How like the hero is confronted with this.
And
But
it's her boyfriend.
usually those books have set up these
Yeah.
difficult questions for like the first two acts.
Yeah.
Like we have already
But
had that.
but
Usually
the
there's an
first two
animal
acts
involved.
but the first two acts are her walking around this giant mansion being angry that she's there and not taking this opportunity to learn how to read.
Right. Repeatedly that comes up and she's like, "No." I'm like,
He offers to teach her to
"You're
read. Like
you're I'm like, "Girl, you are being handed a plot point." Like
that killed me. That drove me nuts. I'm like, I'm sorry. She has nothing to do for days on end. Nothing better to do with her time. Like, take his offer. Learn to read.
yeah, what
That drove me
it's
nuts. I mean, also, Dad, why didn't you take the time to teach your daughter how to read? Like,
right, again,
aren't there like
more
so many
negligent
winter?
parenting.
Like, you're living in this cabin. You're not doing anything else. You're crippled by a fireplace. I'm sure there was lots of nights where you guys had nothing going on. Why didn't you teach her to read?
Yeah, cuz the two sisters know how to read.
And she's not that much younger than them.
Right, which is why I'm like, okay, so did the parental neglect start when she was born?
That's kind of what it sounded like to me, that like the mother didn't like her, treated her
So,
like crap, demanded she take care of her older siblings and father, and then dies.
yeah. So, really, so this is supposed to be like a Beauty and the Beast retelling, like kind of.
Yeah.
And the whole like thing in Beauty and the Beast that everyone always like jokes about is that oh she gets Stockholm syndrome with the beast. No, she has Stockholm syndrome with her family,
Right.
who
To the
treat
point
her
where she is rescued.
terribly.
And she's like, oh, that guy's evil. Like,
Right. They treat her terribly and she wants to go back to them, and then she ends up in this like gorgeous mansion that she's constantly describing as being like peaceful and civilized, where all of her needs are met and attended to. And she's like, wow, this place sucks. No.
and he tells her, I'm taking care of your family, by the way.
Right?
And in her stupid brain, well, fairies don't lie. So what is the issue? I still love that she thinks that fairies can't lie. And they're like, what do you mean? I just feel like, you know what? There there is some really cool world building that if she tried, she could have made this a really interesting, like, political book about, like, the fairies versus the humans, because it's really not there. They talk a lot about the history, and they talk about how, like, there was this great war and now there's a wall, and fairies are here and humans are there. Okay, that sounds like cool. Like, forget whatever this weird Beauty and the Beast retelling is. Let's go back to that.
And I mean, even if you wanted to stay with, like, let's say we have to stay within the genre parameters of this being the like fantasy romance, right? So like the romance plot and the fantasy plot are equally important in theory. I But the fantasy plot is not as important in this book, like at
No.
all.
No.
And in fact, the plot isn't that important in this book, like at all. But like, let's say you were going to keep the same characters, the same general like premise. There is so much you could do with this book.
Right. That's what I'm
There is
saying.
so much. So like, first of all, the opening scenes where she kills the wolf make that actually like really scary, because she's like, "Oh wow, this is going to be like so."
Yeah.
She kills it with one arrow.
Right.
So it's like, okay, immediately the reader is told, "Oh, there's no stakes in this book."
I
The
mean,
very first conflict.
that whole plot with the wolf was stupid anyway.
Yes.
Because the idea was that, what was it? That the idea was that she was supposed to kill a fairy with cold blood, right? That was
Hmm.
the She doesn't even know for sure if that was a fairy. She was like, is that a wolf or a fairy? I don't know, but I want the deer. So, like, it didn't really feel like it worked in that curse at all.
Right. It's also like a hyper specific curse for like no reason. But anyway, um the and so that it continues to be the pattern, is that every time that there's supposedly going to be something like super dangerous and scary that happens, almost immediately we're like, no, it's okay, don't worry about it. And
Yeah.
usually it's someone else like protecting or saving Feyre. Like when she goes
Right.
to the uh the celebration with the drums, and Reese, that's the first time she meets
Fairy
Rhysand, and
orgy.
yeah, and I'm like, so not so they seem like she's going to be attacked, and then Rhysand is like, and they just run away. I'm like, there's never there's never any actual stakes. And also, we never get actual plot or character development, because when we
No.
get to the big reveal about like what is actually going on, Alice just tells her.
Yes.
We don't have to put in any work to
No.
learn the secret. We just get like a 9-page info dump about,
Yes.
why Feyre ruined everything for everyone, including my day. Um,
My whole flight. What the fuck? Like,
what? Yeah, I was like, and I think that's why, like I said, I talked about why I think this book is like we're not the right audience for this book, but I think also an element of why this book personally didn't work for me is that is that what you'd expect for a book of being raising the stakes and consistently increasing the tension and making
mhm.
you work, because that's the fantasy part of the book, right? Is
Yeah.
that like fantasy novels generally are constantly raising the stakes.
Right.
every single step of the way, and it's supposed to get more and more like dire, which is why the idea of like a cozy fantasy is a specific subgenre, because that's
Yeah.
not what we expect from a fantasy novel.
But we do love a
Eh,
good cozy fantasy.
we do love a good cozy fantasy,
Which is, I
so
think
much.
that's actually important to note that we're not like snobs with our fantasy where we're like, oh, this is
Mm.
not high fantasy and like super complicated. Like that's we love a
No,
good cozy fantasy.
we love a good cozy fantasy. We also love a silly book.
Yes.
We are
Love a good
here for
silly book.
we are here for like we both love the Thursday Murder Club books,
So fun.
which I just got the fourth one from the library, so
I'm gonna
um
have a whole like binge fest of them, I think, for because I've only actually read the first one and I keep meaning to go and read the next one.
mhm.
And it's October, so I think this is gonna be like my October like spook binge.
Well,
I'm just gonna read these.
the fourth book, if you don't get to it, the fourth book is set around Christmas.
Ooh, okay, I can hold off and like make
So
that
it
my
could so
Christmas.
you could do a
So fun.
Christmas thing. Are you coming back to the
Yeah.
States for Christmas?
No,
Oh,
not. I think
I'm
January
sorry.
or February.
Okay.
So, but
Um
but yeah, like
anyway,
I read Discworld. Like I have no problem with silly, absurd fantasy. I have
right.
no problem with high fantasy. I loved
No.
Priory. I love Lord of the Rings, obviously. Love them all. But this genre, it just doesn't hit for me.
Right.
Specifically, this
Yes.
did
I
not
and
hit.
and I also like you don't like romance, but I read romance.
You do, yeah,
And like they're not it's not my favorite genre of all time, but if like a bunch of people are like, "Wow, this one was like really cute." I specifically like the cute fluffy romance.
yeah,
Then I'm like, "Okay, yeah," and I'll read it, and usually I have a good time, and it's just like a fun little time that I and it's
yeah.
great. But I think the problem with this book is that it didn't hit the romance beats or the fantasy beats.
Right. And the main character was awful. I think I could forgive a book a lot if the main character is strong.
Yes, like I am not a character reader or a plot reader. I'm both, and I just need one.
Yeah.
So if we have a really strong, compelling plot, I'm willing to
Right.
be like, okay, the characters are just a vehicle to get me through the plot. That's fine. If we have
Yes.
a no plot, just vibes, but the character is like this book I just read, Becky Chambers, A Prayer for the Crown Child. Becky Chambers cannot write a plot. Impossible. Um,
She can.
she cannot,
Love them
and
though.
that's love them, love them. They are like she's one of my favorite authors, but I don't think she would know what a plot was. But I have never been more in love with a robot since Murderbot. And but literally they just walk around. That's the book.
Well, I remember A Small Way to an Angry Planet, like nothing actually happens. There's
Nothing
like one
happens.
nothing happens. There's one scene where there's some maybe pirates and like nothing. Like
Nothing happens. And their
nothing
like
happens.
main plot that they're going on, like their whole reason for their journey across space or whatever, that's like a page
Yeah.
when they like finally like get to the end of their journey and they're like, okay, great. So all of this to say that we do not require a plot. We do not require necessarily there to be like a super engaging character. We don't we don't require there to be like a lot of intensity or drama or a lot of death or a lot of like intense social critique. But there has
One
to be
one
one of
thing.
those things.
One thing
Yeah.
that makes because there's I think this is what bothers me. I get nothing from this book.
Mhm.
Like there's nothing, there's no takeaway. Most of like the events are fading. Like it did nothing for me. It was candy for the brain, but not even in a good way.
Yeah.
Because I've
I
read
didn't
Candy
even
for the Brain, been like,
right.
I know it's bad, but I like it. Like,
Yeah, I didn't even walk away with a little like like, you know?
right.
Like that's what I usually walk away with romance is being like, um but I didn't even like, okay, great, they're together.
I wasn't rooting for them. There was no I
No.
wasn't rooting for them to end up together or stay together, like, I and then, like I said, like, it bothered me that the final trial, she ends up killing the fairies because she's gotta save the guy, and I guess that would also save all of Fairyland, but I don't
But and again, even on that point is that I have read books where the hero kills innocent people.
yeah,
First of all, often they're an anti-hero,
yeah,
and
which she wasn't set up to
she
be.
wasn't set up to be an anti-hero, and if they are like a true hero, they've often been wrestling with these questions the whole time. Like
Yes.
I read Babel recently, and that book is a lot about like colonialism, imperialism, so it's setting up a lot of questions about, is it right to kill colonizer people from your colonized country, the colonizer country. Wow, that's hard to say. Okay, is it wrong to kill the Brits if you're not British? Let's just be real. And specifically Brits who have like not had never been to any of the colonized countries, like, are they, because they benefit, are they still implicit? Like, do they deserve to be
Gotcha,
punished even though
gotcha.
they're like working class people, right?
Right. They don't really have a
Um,
say. They didn't say,
right,
"Hey, go invade those people," but
right,
they are benefiting from that. I gotcha.
right. But they're
Right.
still so the main characters are like faced with these questions, and also The Will of the Many, which I am obsessed with that book, asks a lot of the same questions, a lot more directly about like these two sides of like, is it okay to kill your colonizers if they are innocent?
Gotcha.
Which is a
Oof.
very complicated question
Yeah, I get you.
because
Ooh, that's good.
like you can make a pretty good argument that like the working class people of a colonized nation, of like a colonizing nation, are
Yeah.
also pretty oppressed.
Yes.
Like
They don't have a say. They're
the
just trying
people
to
in the
live,
British
man.
Navy, like the sailors in the British Navy were not treated well. Like
No.
they were treated pretty terribly, even though like they were the vehicles of colonization for like 150
Yeah.
years. Um,
Yeah.
you're in Ireland.
Right? Oh, I know, man.
um, so like if you set up, if they had been setting up like that question from the beginning, like that would be a whole different thing, because
Might have been a good book.
yeah, because if you remember, we when she's talking about the fairies and they meet that one woman in town who is like tells her about how dangerous the fairies are and sells her more of like the ash arrows or whatever. Like if we had kept up that, and we could have gotten to this point where she's confronted with, is it is it okay to kill innocent fairies even though the fairies as a group have
Yeah.
been like oppressors or dangerous to the humans, but also complicated
Right.
with, now I've met fairies and I'm friends with fairies. Like that would
Yes.
have been an interesting moral problem.
Right. But it very much only came up at the end, and it was very badly handled.
Yeah. Um so that wasn't, so there was so many attempts for interesting things to happen, and then they didn't.
Right.
And
Yeah,
so
it it was not a winner for me.
no. No.
I can see why it's popular. It's
Yeah.
got its entertainment value. There's also, like, I think a bit of that comfy feel to the fairy tale. I think that's always what made retellings popular is the fairy tale. You kind of know how this is going to end. She ends up being with the beast, which I'm sorry, he wore a mask, okay?
He could transform into a wolf
No, it was a
occasionally.
beast or like a whatever that was. I don't know what he was.
Oh, I don't know. I'm
I
forgetting
don't
things.
know.
They can all turn into something because like Rhysand has the wings, right?
Right. Yes. No, not all of them. I think
Not
only the
all of
high
them.
fairies, and I don't think all of the high fairies could. I don't. The rules
Okay,
didn't even
whatever.
make sense.
The world building was a little flat.
Oh, a little confused. Yeah. The masks cracked me up because she was like, I wonder what he looks like. And it was like a Clark Kent kind of like it wasn't even like a full on, like he wasn't wearing like a
Yeah,
mask
because they
mask.
could see the bottom part of their faces.
It was one of those masquerade ball masks. It
Yeah,
wasn't very covering. Like
yeah. This isn't like a Spider-Man, like.
which like was another thing that I'm like, this is what the lady cursed you with? Was a masquerade mask? Okay.
Also, I feel like it's relevant to highlight the fact that, except for Feyre, pretty much every other female character is presented as being like bad or evil.
Yeah.
Like
Except for
Alice
that, well,
kinda
except for
isn't.
her, huh?
Alice, the servant, like kind
Yeah.
of isn't.
She's kind of like just she's portrayed as like just an ordinary person. I think that was kind of like showing that fairies are also ordinary people. So
Right.
like she had her family, and did she have a son or something? There was some kid
It's her.
involved.
There, yeah, there was a kid. I think it was her nephew.
Yeah, like a nephew or
She was
something.
responsible for a child.
Right. So like that's kind of where, again, if the author had gotten more in depth with that understanding that this is like there's a whole society of people, of ordinary people just living their lives, but yes, she does work in the high faith court who is responsible for all this evil.
Right. Like that would have been
Yeah.
like that moral complication to it. And again, a book doesn't have to have a moral complication, but if you're going to present me with the hero having to kill three innocent people, or at least who she
Right.
assumes are three innocent people at the beginning,
Yeah.
and then she does kill two of them, you're you're expecting me to
Yeah.
still root for her after that.
Yeah.
Like you're going to
It
have to have
also,
done a lot of heavy lifting to like make me
yeah.
accept that choice and still like retain her as being the hero of this story and
Yeah.
not having like jumped onto a village and origin track.
Yeah. Which maybe that's where she's going in the next one. I'm not bothered to read the next one, so
No, I don't, but I also don't think that based on this that the narrative is going to suddenly become that much more deep. Like we're about to drop off.
I heard they kind of I heard they get more smutty anyway. So I don't know if they get any more complex or in depth. I think they just continue to be entertaining.
And that would be fine if their entertainment value was higher
Yeah.
instead of this like kind of fake, like all of the stuff with Under the Mountain when they're like torturing everyone, like that was just so out of left field, and suddenly trying to
Yeah.
make this into this like super dark, it gave the exact same energy of those lit fic books that we hate, where it's just like, and now we're gonna add some dead bodies, and that makes us serious and intense. Not that we're calling out anyone or anything. There's nothing specific I'm talking about.
Just throw some more dead bodies in. It makes it dark, that makes it deep.
Right, and now, right? Like it was giving the same energy
Yeah.
that if we
Yeah.
just
It
kill
didn't
some people, now it's
it
serious.
didn't know what it wanted to be,
Mm-mm.
and then it ended up failing across the boards.
Mhm. Mhm.
But people loved it. So
Which also like which is part of the reason why a lot of my thoughts have been so about why didn't I like it? Like what makes me different
yeah.
than the people who are loving it? And that's why I came back to I've seen so many people talk about how this got them into reading again. And I
Yeah.
feel like
And I
that's
yeah.
the break in it.
Also, like, recently enough, you had me read Graceling.
Hmm.
So it's hard to go from Graceling, which I actually liked,
Graceling is
to
good.
this. It's like it was like a pale, like imitation.
Yeah, because Graceling has a lot of the same things, but done very well.
Very well.
It has
And
because
it's
it has even that same moral conflict of the hero killing people, like from the very
yeah,
beginning. Because that's like,
yes.
this isn't a spoiler because this is, you find this out on like page 10 or something. Is that like
Right, it's early on.
her special magic power is killing people?
Yes. And that's what
So
she's used for by her lord. Like
yes,
he sets her out and that's what her job
yes,
is.
yeah, forces her to kill people who often she doesn't think did anything wrong. So
Yes.
we're set up with that, like a moral conflict about like the nature of death, and
Yep.
like death at someone's hands from the very beginning. And there is a romance plot in that book too. Like,
Yes.
and not as heavy as ACOTAR, but still it's not, it's a pretty heavy romance plot.
It's in there. And
Um,
it's so much better done. It's more natural. It makes
mhm.
sense. It's
And
you're
you're
rooting
rooting
for
from
them.
them. I love
Yeah,
Poe.
I do.
He's,
I loved him. I was like, yep, 10 out of 10. This is a good one.
yeah. Yeah, and they were characters that seemed very compatible for each other, who
Yep.
they're, because it's, it's the same thing with like this book. It's in first person perspective from Katz's point of view, like, so you see all of this developing through her eyes, and yeah, like,
So I think
that's a good like point of comparison.
I think that's where I've come from. That I'm like, I will struggle to like books like a Thorn of Chrono Roses because I know there's better. And if people liked this book, this a Thorn, how about you ask for a recommendation because I got better. It's so
Yeah.
much better.
I think the Graceling series is a really good jumping point if
Yes.
you from A Court of Thorns and Roses, right? I always just see people say it ACOTAR, so I'm only like 90% sure what the actual title is.
I know. That's I
Um,
was stumbling with that. I'm like, wait, what's the title again?
yeah, I've
The
only seen
fairy book.
people always put it ACOTAR. Um,
ACOTAR.
and and if the because I want to know like what is the main thing that people like about this book, and I know it's going to be different for everyone. And the people who just want like the fairy smut, like they have found, I can't give you recommendations for that, but that exists in plethora. Um,
I I think
so
it's
that's
the
fine.
drama. I think
But there's
there's a
books
bit
with
of like,
way higher drama.
yeah, I yeah. I can't put my finger on it what makes these compelling. What makes this
Mm-mm.
like one of the book talk's favorite, you see it every other reel or every other TikTok. It's, someone's
Yeah,
talking
and
about,
they are coming out, or they just came out with like a whole new like covers, which,
have they?
yeah, so that means that this is, I think, their third or fourth editions,
Wow.
which means that they've put like a ton of money into these books. Do you
Yeah.
want to know something that's really funny? The
Yes.
same
Always.
publisher for ACOTAR published Priory.
No way. Which again, if you guys liked this book, ACOTAR, read Priory.
It is,
Please read Priory.
I promise, everyone's like, oh my gosh, it's so big. It's actually not.
You won't even notice. You
Uh-uh.
just, as soon as you start, it's, oh my God. Love
The
it.
margins are, if you're reading the physical book and you picked it up and you're like, this is like 800 something pages, the margins are huge, the font is huge, the
Yeah.
pages are thick. I have books on my shelf that are 1,000 pages that are
Yeah.
slimmer than the 800-page Priory,
Yeah.
because like I'm pretty sure all three of the Lord of the Rings books stacked on top of each other are smaller,
Oh, mine
even
are wicked
though
thin.
even
They're
though
like really
yeah,
tiny.
And the
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings is way longer because
Yeah.
it has like the tiniest margins and the tiniest font. I don't know why they have
And it's
published
dense.
these. Yeah. So
It's
ACOTAR,
yeah, I wouldn't I would not
Priory's a lot of
recommend
fun.
Lord of the Rings as a jump into the
No,
next book.
no, no, no. That is an advanced level fantasy. Not not in any sort of like shade. If you want to jump for it, please do because
Oh,
we both
please.
have Lord of the Rings tattoos.
There it
Mine's on my leg. I have smog on my leg,
is.
so I can't show
Yeah,
you. But
no, we love them. We
yeah,
absolutely love them.
so I have there's Aowen up there in the corner.
Eowyn.
And she's standing
Not
over
Eowyn.
the mask, and it says, "I am no man." What iconic.
Best part.
Anyway, now I just want to watch the Two Towers again. Um,
We will at Christmas.
but but so like if you want to read Lord of the Rings, we're not telling you not to. In fact, we would
We're
love if
just saying.
everyone in the world did because I think everyone's lives would be improved. But it is if you've read ACOTAR and you're like, what's the next fantasy book I should read?
It's
It should
that
not be
one.
Lord of the Rings. That book is for either like 8 to 12-year-olds who have like an obsessive personality and are going to learn everything, or people who have been like reading fantasy novels for a really long time.
Or both.
Or both, yeah. No, I was the obsessive 8 to 12. Like that was me. I was category 1. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I've read them multiple times.
Yeah,
I mean, I
same.
don't retain facts and things, so like people will be like, "Do you know about this?" I'm like, "You could
No,
tell me a fact 5 times and I won't remember it."
no.
I'm impressed by Lord of the Rings like fanatics who can be like, "This happened in this age and this," and I'm like, "I love you and I'd listen to you forever, but
No,
cannot remember it."
no. Um, but I am planning to do. I've read them in bits and pieces, except for some of the newest ones of the whole like Middle Earth, and I want to read them all like back to back.
So I might be wrong, but I think I saw this January they enter public domain.
Really?
I
All of them?
think
Well, not. It can't be all of them. Is it just The Hobbit?
might maybe one of some I saw
Because
one something about Tolkien's work is
the
um
trilogy and is when entered the public domain until the 2050.
all right, where did
Because
I see this then?
the trilogy, the first one was published in 1950. That's assuming, although I'm questioning if that will enter the public domain because I'm assuming the Tolkien estate has probably renewed the copyrights.
Oh yeah,
The
never mind.
Hobbit,
I
the
made that up.
Hobbit might be though. I don't remember when the Hobbit was published.
Why isn't the public? You can't use it. I'll have to look that up later. Maybe I saw something.
Or maybe you just want it
See,
to be super deeply so you
you
can
just
read it on your podcast.
yes. I would like drop whatever project we were currently working on and been like, no,
We're reading The
we're doing
Hobbit.
So,
um,
I'm gonna have to pick up my kids
but
soon, but
if you do
we
want
need
to do Tolkien from ACOTAR, The Hobbit would be
a
where
good
the
jumping off point.
a good jumping off point. Not the same energy as Lord of the
Now,
Rings, but
it's there'll be no romance, but it is an easy read. The pacing is nice and quick.
yeah.
Things happen really right away. It's funny, like the dwarves and the hobbits. They're cute and funny. It kind of borderlines onto cozy fantasy. Like it's a good
Mhm.
time.
Mhm.
It's highly recommend for beginners. The Hobbit, good one.
Yeah. I mean, it's iconic.
Yes,
Also, it's
I
just
hope
like
I want everyone to read at least
yeah.
The Hobbit because
I forgive people not reading Lord of the Rings because you do have to like be a certain kind of person to really like Lord of the Rings because my man could talk about trees, okay? Like
you can talk about anything. Man, it takes him so
anything.
long to climb that damn mountain.
So long to do anything. Look, we are not
Do anything.
here. If you're reading Lord of the Rings for the plot, you're doing it wrong.
And
If you want,
just
if you want the
mention
plot, watch the movies.
and just mention Tom Bombadil
Yeah.
and watch fans just like
If you want the plot, watch the movies. If you want the vibe, you read the books and then watch the movies. But The Hobbit is very plot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Trying to think what other books would be a great like go to from here that are good. That like
Mhm. Or that at
you
least
get
we thought were
into.
good.
I mean,
Um.
obviously the big viral one you'd already talked about in a previous video was uh Legends and Lattes, and then of
Yeah.
course I've
Of the
read
cozy
I
fantasy.
gotta I had the early copy of Bookshops and Bone Dust.
Yeah. Fancy.
Very same vibes, good time.
I'm trying to think more along the terms of like if you want that drama, but with
Yeah,
the stakes, like you're going to want to move into like more epic fantasy.
probably Robin Hobb then.
I would say Robin Hobb. Yeah. Um.
You could also try David Eddings.
I read all the David Eddings books when I was in high school. They do have romance plots.
They do.
Um.
Sinedra, right? That was her name.
Yeah. That
The Princess Sinedra.
that cat, that one is named after one of the characters in the book. That's Silk.
Oh.
Oh.
Oh,
Mhm.
nice.
Mhm.
I actually, at some point, I want to go back and read them because I was in high school too, so like
Yeah.
memory gone.
Maybe we can
Um,
do a reread. I own the first 5. That's it.
I'm sure I can find them.
Yeah. Um so yeah, David Eddings, Robin Hobb. Should I say it? I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna say it. Brandon Sanderson.
Ah! No, I think you're right. No, but you know what? I would disagree with that because I think people who like ACOTAR are on the more they want that bit of dirt, you know?
True.
Brando
Which,
Sando is clean.
well, Robin Hobb is also pretty clean in
Yeah.
terms of like
Yeah.
smut. If you want torture, um,
No, but I don't even mean like whether or not they contain smut scenes. I think I mean Sando is just he feels clean. It's
mm,
a weird like vibe. I don't like
I
him.
guess
I'm
I guess what
sorry.
I'm going across the spectrum is like depending on the plots you like the most from ACOTAR. If what you're looking for is the like high stakes fantasy
Right.
element, like a
Yes.
lot of Brandon Sanderson's books are about saving the world. So
Yeah.
if you want that, if you want more of the like very like up close character drama where there is the high stakes of saving the world, but also just the high stakes of existing as a human, Robin Hobb.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, if you
I have
want
started
more,
her.
yeah, um, but if you want more of the like cozier feel of like the first, like the middle part of the book where she's just like in the
Mm.
palace and you're seeing all these like cool magical things, then like The Hobbit or Legends and Lattes. I
Yeah.
think
Those are
if you're
great.
looking for something that's going to like put all of those together, and neither of us, like I said, are big like romance readers, so if you want smut recommendations, you have to go somewhere else.
We don't do
Um,
yeah. No.
I mean, David Eddings does have like a pretty good romance plot. Like I was shipping those two hard. And we
What
said the
about
Graceling, Priory, what?
um the one that we read, the Obelisk Gate and fifth season.
Fifth season, the N.K. Jemisin. That
Yeah.
that did have a romance plot in it, didn't it? It
Does
did.
does
It did.
indeed.
Mhm. And
Potential.
is
That has potential.
and
And there
is
is high stakes.
it is dark. If you
It
want to
is
go
dark.
more dark, that one is very dark in some places.
Yeah.
Very good.
Do you
Like
have for a mix of cozy and a tiny bit kind of high stakes, not really cozy high stakes. Like you got to go with Brian Jocks. Any of his Redwall
Or
books,
House
but
Moving
there's
Castle?
not a ton. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, Howl's Moving. Oh yes, that's a good one. Yep,
Mm-hmm.
good pick. So yeah, I think that's why we didn't like ACOTAR. We know there's
Mm-hmm.
better shit.
Yeah. And like we've just been reading a lot more. Like how many books have you read thus far this year, Stina? You know?
I've read about 50.
I just hit 100 yesterday
Yeah.
or 2 days ago. So like, and we read chunky books.
Yeah, we read chunky books. And we do variety, which is nice. Both
Mm-hmm.
of us are kind of like we end up with fantasy and sci-fi a lot, but we do read nonfiction and classics and the like.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm. Whatever
I
else our
think
book
it's
club forces us to read.
well, that's how we end up with hate reads.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Okay, I need to cook dinner.
Okay. All
probably
right. Well,
probably gonna be fish sticks, but I think we should ask the room what should
yes.
we hate read next.
Yes. Yeah, you're the only person that I'll do it with. If anytime else I write something and I don't like it, I'm like DNF, don't care. But if I'm like
Yeah.
I gotta stick with Stina. I can't leave her alone because you'll read a book in like 2 days, and I'm like, well, someone has to morally support Stina. Okay, well, have fun making dinner for your children. Um, and
Leave
I
us
don't
a
know.
comment about what we should hate read next
Yes,
together.
and I will put a link to your podcast in the description too. If
Lost Kid
you,
Stories time.
yes, it's very cute. uh, Public
We will
domain,
be
read
we
aloud.
are wrapping up Peter Pan, so all of Peter Pan is available on Spotify for you to listen to with discussions. There's like a chapter in the wrap up left. So I actually have a production meeting tonight. We'll be discussing our next project. So,
Yay! That's so exciting. All right. Well, I will. I mean,
okay.
I'm saying goodbye as if I'm not going to text you in like 15 minutes, probably.
I know. I do that all the time to people. I'm like, bye. They're like, you're gonna text me in like 5 seconds. I'm
Yeah,
like,
it'll be like. All
you
right.
can't shut me off. That's the problem with me. Once you befriend Stina, it's like your phone just
it's
never shuts up.
it's the end. It's the end of it. I wake up to. I would probably say at least because she's in Ireland and I'm in the States, and so I will wake up to messages of like just random commentary on stuff from her like at least twice a week. It's fantastic. It's my favorite thing. I'll be like, "What's Stina been up to while I've been asleep?" Sometimes it's a voice message, and so I'll just like play it and just like while I wake up.
Well, and like the people I'm really comfortable with, they get voicemail messages, and like I do funny voices and this aspiring voice actor, and she gets all my bloopers too, so that's
Yes.
always fun. I'm pretty sure having a vengeful swearing attack at the fly was probably top of the
Yes.
list.
I should have like saved that and like made it a ringtone or something.
I have them saved, so I can send them on.
I can put it into my like audio library of like sound effects for my videos.
God, fucking fly! Oops, I spilled my coffee cup.
Yes, I think that's the perfect marriage. All
Okay,
right. Well,
I
this has
gotta
been
go.
fantastic, and I will talk to you later. Bye.